Welcome back to the Daily Crypto Deep Dive. Today we're looking at one of the biggest quiet revolutions happening in global finance. It's not about Bitcoin ETFs or billion-dollar venture rounds. It's about the one corner of crypto that's already being used every single day by millions of people who don't care about price charts. They just need their money to work. We're talking about stablecoins, the digital dollars that are beginning to replace cash, bank wires, and even PayPal for entire economies that no longer trust their own currencies. While the market's attention flickers between ETFs and AI tokens, this is the story quietly redefining what money actually means in a world where banks are slow, borders are optional, and people just want value that holds. Every financial revolution starts when ordinary people find a simpler path than the one the system gives them. That's exactly what's happening in places like Argentina, Nigeria, Turkey, and the Philippines, where stablecoins such as USDC and Tether have become lifelines rather than investment tools. They aren't just speculative assets, they're survival mechanisms. In Buenos Aires, supermarket owners price food in unofficial crypto dollars. You'll see handwritten boards showing two numbers, the peso price and the USDT price, because inflation moves faster than printing menus. In Lagos, freelancers take stablecoin payments for overseas contracts because local banks either block international wires or swallow a week's wage in fees. In Istanbul, university students pool savings in USDC to protect them from the lira's decline. And in Manila, overseas workers sending money home have discovered that using a stablecoin wallet gets cash to their families in minutes, not days, and without Western Union's 10% cut. This isn't a future concept, it's now. According to Chainalysis, stablecoins now account for more than 70% of all global crypto transaction volume. Circle's USDC and Tether's USDT settle more money daily than Venmo, PayPal, and Western Union combined. Even the Bank for International Settlements, the central bank of central banks, has acknowledged that dollar-denominated stablecoins have become a de facto parallel banking network. Jeremy Allaire, the CEO of Circle, said recently that stablecoins are no longer a crypto story, they're a dollar story. And that's exactly right. Because what's really happening here is that the US dollar has escaped its own borders. It's now living natively on the internet, moving faster, cheaper, and more freely than the legacy financial system ever could. For a long time, the narrative was that crypto would kill the dollar. The truth is more ironic. Crypto has become the vehicle through which the dollar is thriving globally, even in countries that want to de-dollarize. If you're sitting in Argentina, holding USDC on your phone isn't an ideological statement, it's just economic logic. But to understand how big this shift is, let's zoom out for a second. Traditional banking infrastructure still runs on a patchwork of correspondent networks that date back to the 1970s. Every cross-border payment touches multiple intermediaries, each taking fees and adding delays. Stablecoins, by contrast, are instant settlement tokens, programmable dollars that can move peer-to-peer 24 hours a day, with a visible audit trail on public ledgers. Kaiko's senior analyst Desislava Ober recently put it bluntly. For emerging markets, stablecoins are the first real upgrade to the dollar in 50 years. That's not exaggeration. It's the same technology stack that allows DeFi traders to settle complex derivatives, but it's being used by taxi drivers, designers, and shopkeepers who've never touched an exchange interface in their lives. The reasons vary by region, but the pattern is the same. Where inflation destroys trust, stablecoins step in. Where banking systems break, they replace them. Where capital controls lock people out, they open a back door to global liquidity. It's also creating new kinds of businesses. Remittance apps in Asia now route payments through on-chain stablecoin rails without users even realizing it. Fintechs in Africa and South America have quietly replaced dollar bank accounts with USDC wallets. And in the Middle East, family offices are holding a percentage of their liquid reserves in tokenized dollars because it's easier to move than gold. That's the macro story. But what does it mean for investors, for people listening right now who hold Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Solana, and wonder how this affects their portfolios? Here's the simplest answer. Stablecoins are infrastructure, and infrastructure attracts liquidity. When people around the world start holding and transacting in on-chain dollars, It increases the demand for block space, drives transaction fees, and deepens liquidity pools across DeFi and exchanges alike. That means stronger network revenues for Ethereum, Solana, and any Layer 1 or Layer 2 that hosts stablecoin volume. In practical terms, the adoption of stablecoins is bullish for the entire base layer ecosystem. It's the digital equivalent of new users moving to town and paying rent. Even Bitcoin benefits indirectly. As stablecoins normalize digital payments, they make crypto ownership feel safer and more familiar. That psychological bridge, from using a stablecoin to trusting self-custody, is how first-time users often end up buying their first Satoshi. The other portfolio impact comes from yield. When trillions of dollars circulate in tokenized form, investors can lend, stake, or collateralize those tokens for returns. We're already seeing the rise of US Treasury-backed stablecoins, like Circle's USDC Treasury Reserve and Franklin Templeton's tokenized money market fund. Those instruments blend traditional yield with blockchain accessibility, the birth of digital fixed income. For retail investors, that could eventually mean stable yields without middlemen. We'll take a short break here. When we come back, we'll talk about where all this is heading, the geopolitics, the risks, and the quiet competition between central banks and crypto companies for control of the next generation of money.
Avoiding your unfinished home projects because you're not sure where to start? Thumbtack knows homes, so you don't have to. Don't know the difference between matte paint finish and satin? Or what that clunking sound from your dryer is? With Thumbtack, you don't have to be a home pro. You just have to hire one. You can hire top-rated pros, see price estimates, and read reviews all on the app. Download Thumbtack today.
Okay, let's continue where we left off. If the first half of this story was about adoption, the second half is about power. Because the rise of stablecoins isn't just economic, it's geopolitical. Governments are watching this unfold in real time, and not all of them are happy. The US Treasury, for one, now finds itself in an unusual position. Stablecoins like Tether and USDC are effectively expanding the reach of the dollar, but they're doing it without the Federal Reserve's control. That's both a strategic advantage and a policy headache. Jeremy Allaire put it best during a recent interview. The United States has an opportunity to lead the modernization of the dollar, or to watch others do it for them. He wasn't exaggerating, because in parallel, China, Europe, and dozens of emerging markets are testing their own central bank digital currencies. The difference is that those systems are closed and surveilled. Stablecoins, for all their controversy, remain open networks that anyone can access with an internet connection. Take Nigeria as an example. The government launched its own CBDC, the e-Naira, but adoption is minimal. Meanwhile, USDT trades actively on peer-to-peer markets because people trust Tether's dollar peg more than their central bank's promises. That's the silent referendum playing out across developing economies, citizens choosing free market money over state-issued digital cash. Turkey tells a similar story. Inflation there hit more than 70% at its peak, and stablecoins became the unofficial hedge. Binance's TRYB stablecoin, USDC, and Tether all see higher transaction counts in Turkey than in many G7 countries. Locals don't need to understand blockchain theory. They just know that holding digital dollars is safer than watching their savings evaporate. Even in more stable economies, the shift is visible. In Latin America, over half of cross-border payments from freelancers to US employers are now settled in stablecoins. In Southeast Asia, the Philippine peso corridor has been partially replaced by USDC rails integrated into remittance apps like coins.ph. And across Europe, fintechs are beginning to offer stablecoin yield accounts, effectively turning DeFi protocols into back-end liquidity engines. So what does that mean for the broader market? It means crypto has already built the prototype of a new financial system, one that runs parallel to banking but isn't dependent on it. The infrastructure that used to require government treaties now exists as open-source code. That's why the IMF and BIS have both started referencing synthetic dollarization, the idea that stablecoins are dollarizing economies from the bottom up, rather than through policy. Chainalysis data shows that in parts of sub-Saharan Africa, more than 60% of all crypto transaction volume now comes from stablecoins. In Latin America, it's closer to 80%. That's not a bubble. That's a parallel system emerging in plain sight. For investors, the takeaway is simple but powerful. Stablecoins might compress volatility, but they expand participation. More participation means more network value, more fees, and more use cases anchored in real-world demand. And those are the metrics that sustain markets long after the hype cycles fade. Kaiko's research team recently estimated that if global stablecoin supply grows to $5 trillion by the end of this decade, a conservative projection given current trends, Ethereum alone could generate an additional $6 billion per year in base layer transaction fees. That's not speculative yield, that's transactional revenue, the backbone of a sustainable crypto economy. Of course, there are risks. Regulation will tighten, and stablecoin issuers will have to meet higher transparency standards. Tether still draws scrutiny over its reserves, and even Circle faces questions about custody concentration. But the direction of travel is clear. Governments are realizing it's easier to regulate open networks than to build closed ones people don't want. The European Union's MiCA framework is already licensing compliant stablecoins, and in the US, the bipartisan bill gaining momentum could create a unified standard for dollar-backed tokens. If that happens, it legitimizes an entirely new category of digital cash, one that could coexist with, and maybe eventually replace, legacy bank deposits for everyday use. Think about what that means for portfolios. If stablecoins become the main settlement layer for international trade, then holding exposure to the blockchains that process those transactions, Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, or whichever networks win the throughput game, becomes equivalent to owning a slice of the world's financial plumbing. That's infrastructure investing in the truest sense. The other angle is yield. As regulated on-chain treasuries grow, investors will likely see tokenized versions of traditional fixed-income products. Imagine earning treasury bill yield on a wallet balance, accessible 24/7, with instant liquidity and no bank gatekeepers. That's where this is heading, and it's why big funds like Franklin Templeton and BlackRock are already experimenting with tokenized cash vehicles. The irony is that the future of banking might end up looking less like Goldman Sachs and more like Coinbase or Circle. A few years from now, your wallet app could hold both your paycheck and your portfolio. Stablecoins for spending, Bitcoin for long-term store of value, and tokenized funds for yield. The lines between savings, payments, and investment will blur into a single digital balance sheet. For listeners managing their own portfolios, the message here isn't to chase every new token. It's to understand the infrastructure that makes those tokens useful. Exposure to base layers and stablecoin yield platforms could quietly outperform hype coins, simply because they capture real economic flow. And in the end, markets reward the systems that people actually use. So where does this all lead? Maybe to a future where every transaction, from remittances to real estate, settles instantly on a blockchain. A future where central banks oversee stability, but code handles execution. And a future where the dollar remains dominant not because of politics, but because of technology. It's happening quietly, but it's unstoppable. Stablecoins aren't replacing crypto, they're completing it. They're the bridge that turns ideology into infrastructure, volatility into utility, and potential into presence. That's today's deep dive. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, make sure to follow the Daily Crypto Deep Dive and leave a 5-star rating. It helps more people discover independent crypto journalism. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're seeing stablecoins being used in your part of the world. And as always, we'll see you at the top.